While every team in Formula 1 will of course have their expectations about what can be achieved for a particular season, it doesn't always go to plan. In fact, things can get so pear-shaped that a season becomes a disaster and completely forgettable. Let us now look back through each current F1 team's worst ever season. I usually like to do these things in alphabetical order, and this will be no exception as Alfa Romeo are first on the list. Although in the present time they are mainly towards the back of the grid, they have been in worse situations. If you go back to 1985, you will see that the Italian constructors suffered a staggering 11 double retirements and only got both their cars to finish in 3 races the entire season. No points were scored for the season, as Eddie Cheever and Riccardo Patrese were made to look for new teams at the end of the year. Special mention to the 1979 season, where they had another pointless season, although Alfa Romeo only competed in 5 Grand Prix here. Second, and AlphaTauri have technically been in Formula 1 for about 15 years now, where they predominantly participated under the old brand of Toro Rosso. There are 2 glaring candidates here for worst season, its debut year in 2006 and 2009. While Toro Rosso did finish dead last in 2009, I will need to give the nod to the 2006 season, as first off, 2009 was actually a rather equal season, where only 2 teams failed to score a podium, Toro Rosso being one of them along with Williams. Secondly, the team only scored a singular point for the year, which was 7 fewer than in 2009. And thirdly, while they did finish a spot higher than what they did in 2009 with 9th, they only beat out weak backmarker teams in Super Aguri and Midland, whom both went pointless, capping off a grueling campaign for inexperienced drivers Scott Speed and Vitantonio Liuzzi. Although this is Alpine's first season under the rebranded name, they are effectively the same team as previous years under the Renault banner. The French team have had a solid history in Formula 1, but they've had their poor seasons as well, like their second season in F1 where they ran a single car in 1978, finishing 12th with a singular points finish. But for their worst season, I have elected to go with their 2016 season where they came back after 4 seasons out of the sport. As you could expect after a little hiatus, Renault really struggled to get accustomed to the hybrid era, which saw them only score 8 points and 9th in the constructors with Kevin Magnussen and Jolyon Palmer as their drivers. After a year which had Renault only secure 3 top 10 finishes, the rebranded Alpine have since become reliable midfield runners. Time for Aston Martin, and since they've only been in Formula 1 for 2 seasons before now, it's slim pickings for a contender. The worst season belongs to the 1960 season where their DBR5 was a laggard in truth, still running with a front-engined car when many teams at the front were already adopting the superior rear-engined car. Money was an issue for the team, where in 1960, an example was where Aston Martin were alerted that they would not get compensated for starting the Dutch Grand Prix, so they had to withdraw driver Roy Salvadori from the event. Aston Martin ended up only participating in one other Grand Prix where they were miles off the pace. In fact, this season was so poor on and off track that they pulled out before season's end and decided it'd be best not to enter the following year as they were initially planning to do. Off to Ferrari, and having entered every single season so far in F1, they are bound to have a bad season on the odd occasion. You may be surprised to find out that for as poor of a year Ferrari had in 2020, this did not eclipse the historically bad 1980 season. Initially, it was reliability that was their weakness, but as the season progressed, everyone realized that the Ferrari was just dreadful. Jody Scheckter, who was the reigning world champion, went on to have the worst title defense of anyone in F1 history, as he could only have a singular top 6 finish for the entirety of the year. Gilles Villeneuve would put in a few commendable performances, but ultimately Ferrari could only manage 10th, the worst constructor finish ever, where the prancing horse claimed just 8 points. Haas is next up, and you don't need to look too far back, as 2020 was easily Haas's worst season to date, where the American team could only put 3 points on the board as they were a backmarker, but there were at least times where they were not the slowest car in the field. This cannot be said for the 2021 season, where I believe it will end up being the worst season Haas has ever endured, with an inexperienced lineup of Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin. Additionally, Haas have said that they did abandon any development for the 2021 car, so don't be surprised if the team remain pointless and have the worst ever season once again, barring any miracles. McLaren actually have many candidates for this unwanted honour, whether it be the opening years where they ran a singular car or the 2015 and 2017 seasons where they were 9th. I opted to go with their 2015 season, which represented the first year of the reborn partnership between McLaren and Honda, and it definitely did not start well, or even end well for that matter. Fernando Alonso joined Jenson Button at McLaren and was promised that McLaren would be title contenders in the long run. Safe to say that this wasn't the case in any of his years there, but particularly that first year where it felt like McLaren were always a sitting duck on the straights despite the efforts of the two world champions. McLaren scored 27 points and could only beat a financially stricken Marussia. This, as we know, was only the start of a forgettable second partnership with Honda. Oh yeah, and shout out to that 2007 season where they got excluded from the championship. Thought that would be worth a mention. Looking for a Mercedes worst ever season, and I got to tell you that the worst season is still not really that bad, and it just goes to show how organised and prolific Mercedes are as a constructor in F1. In saying this, the worst season would be from 2012, with Nico Rosberg and Michael Schumacher lining up together for a third consecutive year. It was looking like a relatively good year with a first win since coming back into F1 and 2 other podium finishes. Unfortunately, the final 6 races of the season yielded a singular points finish of 7th at the Brazilian Grand Prix from Schumacher in his last hurrah. The German powerhouse finished 5th in the Constructors with 142 points, which to be honest, is still a relatively half-decent season, especially for a worst season, and by far the best worst season by any current team, if that even makes sense. Modern powerhouse Red Bull have enjoyed a lot of success in the past decade and a bit. As we know though, it was a slow building up process towards success, and tough times particularly came in the 2006 season where they failed to make additional progress from the maiden campaign and probably went backwards if anything. As much as David Coulthard tried to carry the team to overachieve with the car, such as that brilliant podium at Monaco, the year was marred by many liability issues, particularly felt by Christian Klien, who had a lot of retirements and lost his seat for the final part of the season to Robert Dornbos. Red Bull would go on to finish the season in 7th with 16 points, the lowest tally ever achieved by Red Bull in its final season with a British licence. And finally, to Williams. And historically a strong outfit, it has been anything but strong in recent years, as the constructor now see themselves massively down the order. I tossed my head between choosing last season or 2019 for worst season. Williams did score a point in 2019, which they couldn't even manage for 2020. However, despite this, I have still gone along with crowning 2019 as the worst season, as you will notice that the pace was drastically back. Sometimes even the best performing car was over a full second back on the next worst car on the grid. Qualifying outcomes as well were quite different, as Williams never got out of Q1 in 2019, whereas in 2020 they got out of Q1 multiple times. So even though Robert Kubica was able to get Williams a miracle point, the pace differential between the 2019 and 2020 car means that I have to say that the 2019 season was the British manufacturer's worst season, regardless of the points scored. Anyway, subscribe to my channel for more of this content, like the video if you enjoyed it, and Sports-Sided is now on Facebook, so like the page to keep up with my activity. Other social media pages might be coming soon, so stay tuned for that.